Greetings, friends. Your cartoonist pal Stan here with a brand new episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon, the show where I celebrate the fact that the hobby of tabletop role playing games is now more than 50 years old, just like me. And that's a long time. There's a lot of interesting things that have happened, a lot of interesting people that I have had the luck to work alongside or with or near or just happen to meet at conventions. And there's lots of stories to tell, and I want to celebrate. I want to celebrate all the stories. I want to celebrate the role-playing game community, and so that's what we do here. While we talk, I will be drawing a cartoon homage to a classic piece of D&D or of gaming art. The first 50 plus of them were all D&D, so it's very easy to say. Not just D&D, lots of other games too. So, that's what the show is all about. We've been bouncing around between interviews like the show started with and what I call work in progress shows where I try and catch up on some of the drawings I've started but not finished. So tonight, we're doing an interview. We're going back to the classic format. And for that, I've got a guest, super awesome guy. I don't know that we ever worked on projects together. I don't think we did. But I know that I knew him from time at Wizards of the Coast, and from since then at all kinds of different events and just kind of hanging out. It's game designer Darrin Drader. Now I just have to find the button to hit. We're having a good show so far. Hey, Darrin, thank you for joining. We haven't actually worked directly together, right?
I don't think we have, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't start doing projects for Wizards of the Coast until shortly after they had laid you off. So,
well, I had a feeling that but you were doing freelance for Wizards before then, right?
No, actually, they kind of picked me up because all of a sudden they were shorthanded.
Well, you're welcome.
I would have gotten there either way, I think, but it's not the way I would have chosen. It's just the way it happened.
You can't choose your time. You just make the most of it.
Exactly.
Well, it sure feels like. I mean, I know we've been moving in the same circles for the last 20, 25 years. So,
yep.
I feel like we work together. So that's good enough.
We did a lot of lunch at was it Cedar
River Smokehouse.
Yeah, we did get to meet up and hang out there quite a bit. So that was a good time.
So, well then, why don't you, since I seem to be misremembering everything, give everyone just kind of a brief, who is this Darrin Drader guy?
All right, so I'm Darrin Drader. I started freelancing in the RPG field about 25 years ago. I was in sales before that, and turned out I was not Y2K compliant, so I came to gaming instead. I've worked on some Dungeons and Dragons. I've worked on some Pathfinder. I worked on Kingdoms of Amalur, which R.A. Salvatore was attached to. I've worked on 5th edition, Traveler, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I probably worked for most of the major publishers in the industry at one time or another. A couple of years ago, I started up Triple D, Darrin Drader Designs.
Mm-hmm.
And lately my efforts have been more focused on promoting that and developing that and having that be my full-time thing, which means I have to do less hustling and, more things than I did as a freelancer, layout and editing and all that kind of fun stuff.
It's a different kind of hustling. Less hustling other people. You gotta hustle yourself.
Well, you got to hustle yourself. You also got to hustle for sales. So there probably is more hustling now that I think about it.
Hi, David Shepard. Hi, Michael in chat. Thank you all for joining us. And the other fine folks who are watching and not commenting. Again, I always say that. I'm not trying to guilt you. You don't have to comment. but if you want to, we'll keep an eye on what's going on in the chat room. David, where are you? Where are you calling in from that you're staying up to see the show? Um, I always thought you were like East Coast, which is a little late, but not
Yeah,
stay
it's about
up
nine
late.
9 o'clock there.
9 o'clock. That's I yeah. There are people that go to bed at 9, but um. So I'd like to start these conversations talking about how gaming itself came into your life, because as I often say with folks, anyone that got in around that era, that got in the first half or first 2/3 of this uh, history of tabletop. When we were young, gaming was not an assumed. These days, gaming is kids coming up. They're going to get into gaming. Gaming is just
Mhm.
everywhere, but it wasn't when we were younger. So how is it that uh, that gaming got into your life?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I was familiar with Dungeons and Dragons because of the Saturday morning cartoon. I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people my age that's going to be true for, but I'd never actually played the game. I didn't really know much about it. Given the age I was at and the subject matter of the cartoon, it's kind of uh, an action fantasy thing, and so that was pretty cool. But I ended up in Spokane at the Toys R Us, and there was the Dungeons and Dragons red box set. And at that point, my mom was like, "Oh, you can go and get anything you want in this whole store. What do you want?" And I saw that, and I was like, "I want that red box set, and I want that purple colored booklet that's up there too." That's what we got. That purple colored booklet ended up being the Lost City, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Um, so we got that, and I brought it home, and I remember going through it and reading about Bargle and the cleric who, he kills and what you're doing, and I remember reading through this, but not really being able to figure out how the game works. And so
Yeah.
after a few attempts, and I was probably about 9 or 10 at that time. Um, After a while, the box set ends up in my closet, and I didn't really give it much thought until a friend of mine. We'd actually been best friends from the time I was 4 years old. His name was Shane. He had used to live across the street from me when I was like about age 4 through 6. And during that time, we went through Star Wars together and Battlestar Galactica together, and grade school and all this stuff. And eventually, my mom got married, and we moved. And his parents got a divorce, and he ended up in Arizona. So we didn't see each other until he came to visit the fall of my 6th grade year, I believe. So it was kind of like early fall. Um, the weather was still nice and almost summer like, and I lived out in the country, so we didn't get much TV. And he was there to visit for like 2 weeks, and at over the weekend, he comes to stay with me, and like I said, there wasn't. TV was all snowy, and we got 3 channels. And he was like, "So what is there to do around here?" Yeah, I'm living in the country. It's miles of rolling hills and wheat fields. um, and eventually he's digging through my closet, and he comes out and he's like, "You've got D&D." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." So he's like, "Well, we should play it. Have you ever played it?" "I haven't played it. I can't figure it out." Right. So, so anyway, we started out, it's just the two of us, right? Because we didn't have any of my friends over. It was just
Right.
me and him. So he has these pre-gen NPCs, which actually come with the module, and then I created my first ever character, a half elf named Whisperfoot, who is a fighter thief, and uh, let's just say the next couple of days kind of blew my mind. It was the most fun I'd ever had, just sitting there with playing a game, basically. Um, so uh, so that was kind of how I was introduced to it.
Had he
From
played before?
Yes.
So. All right. So yeah, I mean that's always been the thing, right? D&D is next to impossible to learn from just a book. No matter what edition we're talking about. And I've been involved in a lot of attempts at beginner boxes, and the hope is that people can take the box and it's just a box. But the fact of the matter is that what you really need is someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you really need to have somebody who it's like, what is this all about? What are we trying to do here?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Which I mean,
So,
we're going to talk about this later, but I mean that's the beautiful thing today with YouTube and all the what you it used to be for us. You needed to find someone who had that arcane knowledge that they could pass it on to you, and now uh, you can get that impetus, that kind of I see what it is. I want to do that thing. That looks
hmm
cool.
hmm well, even if I'm trying to learn a new system these days, I will watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out, basically how to play the Modifius Fallout game because I wanted to run a campaign, which I ended up doing, and I streamed it. Um, but just to learn the basics of the game, I was like, well, I can go through this book for 10 hours, or I can watch it in actual play. So I got onto Cyberpunk Uncensored, Cybernation Uncensored is what they're called, and just watched their stream of Fallout, and in very little time, I knew how to play.
Right. Right. All right. So you and Shane played.
hmm
So if he was just visiting after he left, what happened then?
So at that point, I didn't know anybody locally who played. I lived in the country, like I said.
Yeah.
I had some friends from school who, a few of them had played once or twice. A few of them were like, "Oh, I'm interested," or "Hey, I'm a big fantasy geek," whatever. So for a long time, I was trying to just get a game together, right? And I was also collecting these books. I had the basic set, but then I also got the monster manual, and I got the
Hmm.
player's handbook and the DMG. Um, and I was making. I would just sit there and make characters because I had nobody to actually game with.
Right.
um, there were a couple of friends of mine that they're willing to try it or that type of thing. So like one friend I remember, we just tried playing uh, Isle of Dread over the telephone. um, which is interesting. Um, eventually, eventually I'd find a few like small groups, and it wasn't anything really steady until I was in high school. Once I got to high school, then I had my first actual group, which I was DMing, and from there it just kind of took off.
um, what do you when you say took off? What do you mean?
Well, like I said, I'd been collecting books, and by that point I had close to a bookshelf full of gaming, full of D&D stuff. I also had a couple of shelves full of D&D novels.
Hmm.
Um, and the
Oh,
game
that's
became
interesting.
a
So you started reading the novels.
oh yeah, yeah.
Which ones?
I started with Dragonlance. So I was actually reading the Dragonlance Chronicles and Lord of the Rings at exactly the same time. And I would have both books I'd carry with me to my classes. I was in middle school at the time. Um, so to me, it's like the Dragonlance Chronicles were just as important as Lord of the Rings, in my mind. Um, so that's kind of where I started with the novels. But you know, I read, I would say, a good 2/3 of the Forgotten Realms novels, probably at least half of the Dragonlance novels, most of no, some of the Greyhawk novels, all the Gygax Greyhawk novels, including the Gord the Rogue,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you know, which you did post TSR.
So I mean, so really, you read more fiction than you played games early on.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. But then once I had once I had a stable group, once I was in high school, it turned into an every Friday thing.
Right,
And by that time, when they first started Dungeon Magazine, it was subscription only, and I was just a poor kid with no job at that time,
right,
so I had no subscription. But when it started showing up in the store, I bought them, every issue I could find.
right,
So um, what I ended up doing was I kind of pieced together this campaign using Dungeon Adventures. And I would have started with dungeon number one, which is where they introduced the red dragon flame, right?
right.
Because I had the adventure where flame returns, which was later on. Well, I didn't have that, and there's no way to get it back then. So I ended up substituting the basic module horror on the hill, which ends with a red dragon
Right.
encounter, which is where I introduced flame. And then eventually we go through several other adventures, and then
Awesome.
eventually flame returns.
Awesome. That's great. That's the kind of that's the kind of gumption that we need in the industry. Lo and behold, you got here.
Hmm.
So, you did you like it's interesting that you had an interest early on, and then you had a break, and then you got in high school. Did you have did you have another break in there? A lot of people I know, the break comes at college, right? It comes out of high school into college, where suddenly you realize the world's a little bigger. But
Hmm.
most of the people who have that have a good 4 or 5 or 6 years leading into it from having started earlier. Did you? How did it go for you?
Well, okay, so initially it wasn't so much that there was a break as there was a prolonged number of years where I was looking for a group. But
Mm,
then so that first, that high school group that I had, that led to a college group, which kept me busy for the next 3 4 years, something like that. I actually didn't finish college first time around. I have since finished it. But anyway, um, so I was pretty solidly gaming for probably a good 10 years. Um, Maybe it's more like eight, somewhere in there. And then it was after that. At that point, I was I was married, and I was getting a job. I went into sales.
mm,
That's where the break came for me,
right,
because I had a really demanding sales schedule. Um, my we were starting a family. My wife was working sales as well, so it was like there just wasn't time for it at that
right,
time.
right.
And that was in the mid to late '90s, and I had moved from Pullman, Washington, just where I was born, raised, went to college, to the Seattle area. Um, and of course, you know what happened in the late '90s.
I know several things that happened in the late '90s.
So, like I said, I
Which are
was
you talking about?
I was living in uh, the 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 big moment for me. I was living in the Seattle area. I had been selling computers for Future Shop, and then Future Shop went belly up, and then I ended up selling mattresses for Sleep Train, um, which no longer exists. And then Sleep Train got bought up, and I was like, the new company, which is still around under a different name. Um, I had ethical issues with the way they did business,
Uh,
and so I basically gave them the see you later. Um, and so at that time, and my wife at the time, she's now my ex, but she was still working sales and doing quite well. So I didn't need to be working at that time. So at that point in time, I started like ramping up the gaming again, and that was at the same time that TSR got bought up by WotC.
Right. And suddenly became a local
So
company.
suddenly became a local company, and at that point, I was like, I'm going to end up at WotC. It's going to happen.
All right.
um,
I'm gonna switch here and start doing some drawing while we chat.
mhm.
You're saying the Dragonlance was important to you, and I'm gonna be doing a Dragonlance drawing. This is from
Awesome.
DL8 Dragons of War.
Hmm.
All right, so you decided this is it. This is what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I was sending in a lot of proposals for Dungeon Magazine, and I was getting a lot of rejections from Chris
Right.
Perkins.
Well, that's
But
the
I
way it
mean,
goes.
I understand why, being in the industry now for 25 years, I understand why the slush pile exists. Because somebody might have a great idea and they might have a great proposal. You don't know if they can actually do the work. And even if they do the work, you don't know if they can do the work well.
Right.
And here I was, brand new. So, um, brand new, unpublished. I had been an English major before I gave up on that. Um, so I knew a bit about writing, but not nearly as much as I probably should have. Um, and Like I said, I'd been submitting a number of proposals to Dungeon. I kept getting this doesn't work because this, that, the other thing, and um, then third edition comes out. At that point in time, I was playing. I had a group with the manager of one of the WotC retail stores.
Right.
Um,
This is back when Wizards had retail stores nationwide.
yep, yep. So I go to the manager, one of those. Actually, it wasn't even the manager; it's one of his employees. And so Wizards of the Coast, they're kind of hard to get into. And he's like, yeah, yeah, tell me about it. And I'm like, is there a back door? And he's like, oh, you mean just like for temp work and that type of thing? Yeah, yeah, Parker Staffing. Oh, really? Okay. Uh, Next day, Parker Staffing. I would really like to talk to you about temporary work. And it was probably within a week, I ended up doing my first temp job for WotC. Short time after that, I ended up in the ecom department working for the Star Wars fan club. That lasted for a couple of years. During that time, the OGL had just been released, so I started up this tiny little company with a couple people I knew called Dark Portal Games. I also got together with Jim Butler, who was starting up Bastion Press at that time.
Right.
So in a very short period of time, I was doing work for Dark Portal Games, and that didn't last particularly long, but we did a couple of things. I started doing a lot of work for Jim Butler, and then um, after a couple of years being at WotC, couple things happened. The Star Wars fan club went away, and we got rolled into the customer service department, where I became the primary point of contact for Dungeons and Dragons. Um, that also just happened to be right after the Hasbro layoff started.
Right.
But at that point in time, I was talking to Julia Martin about doing work for the website. I was talking to Ed Stark about doing something for official. um, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, that was. You know, we talk over the years that I've done this. I've been in the industry. There's always a question of how do you get in,
Hmm.
and it went from like you were saying, went from the magazines, what it used to be, to now there aren't magazines, but the website for a long time was a great resource, right? It was a
Oh
great
yeah.
resource for fans, and it was one of those places that needed a never ending stream of material, and it was a great place to cut your teeth. I
Hmm.
think I bemoan the loss of both the magazines and the website to this day. It's a lot easier to get it in there and do self publishing, but um, there's nothing like the experience you get from working with the company, right? From working
Right.
with the editors who'll tell you there's a difference between this is good enough and this is what we want, and this is what
Hmm.
will get you more work.
Yep. Yep. I think in my case, being easy to work with was probably what got me more work, because I remember that first meeting with Chris and Ed Stark after I turned over um, after my turnover for the Book of Exalted Deeds, and we were going through my spells, and I remember that a few of those spells, they're like, well, these are interesting. You know, Hound Archon's head. What exactly does it do once you've got the head of a Hound Archon, right? you know, um, so there were a lot of cases where it's like, I thought it was fairly obvious when I was writing it. This is what happens. Um, no, seriously, what advantages do you get specifically when you get the head of a Hound Archon? Okay, well, that's got to be written into the spell. you know.
Right.
Uh, so we had a few of those things, and of course I took notes, and my revised turnover was much better, um, and I was able to keep those things in mind moving forward as I got more work.
Yeah, there's a big difference between writing for yourself and writing for an audience, and those are the kinds of things where you 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 have to be so much more explicit
Hmm.
when it's publishing for an audience, and it's a you also have to pare back some of this stuff uh, because of that explicitity. That's not a word. Explicitness.
Yes.
Um, it because you have to lay everything out. You have to. You may. I found I had to simplify things that I want. This can do this and that and that and that. No, it can do this. All right. Well, in my home game, it can do all those other things.
Yeah, I mean, you've also got to kind of look at, according to the official design philosophy, we want, we want this, and you don't know what the official design philosophy is unless you actually talk to somebody about it.
Right.
So when you're thinking, I'm going to make this, which does that other thing, well, that's against the design philosophy. So sorry. And there is, I remember bumping into that quite a few times.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a challenge when that anything that you're making for Wizards of the Coast has to fit their needs for their broad audience. And
Hmm.
that brings in a bunch of things where it's like, well, there's no reason why that couldn't work, but it doesn't work.
Right.
I remember having a conversation with Jim Ward after third edition launched. I worked for him at in Lake Geneva, and he was not part of the. He did not come out with the rest of uh, the group that did for storied reasons, but
Hmm.
but he wasn't there. But he did wind up. He was interested when third edition launched in possibly doing some stuff, and he called
Hmm.
me up or to ask about what he needed to know. And I remember talking to him at the time about reading the players, the DMG in particular, and looking at the design um, ethoses, and that you needed to follow that. And he called me back a few weeks later. He said he read it, and that I was I didn't know what I was talking about. None of those things were absolutes, and I had to. I said, Jim, you know this. What's absolute is what the audience wants, and the audience for this has, for third edition, really picked up and decided that these things are real and they demand it. So we
Mhm.
have to do it. Like, I don't want to
Yeah.
do all those things either, but you have to do that because if you don't, the audience won't like it, and therefore it won't sell. You're right. You don't. You can do whatever you want, but if you want to sell books, you got to do this.
Yep. Yep. And at that time, he was running Fast Forward Entertainment, right?
That was right before Fast Enter. That was at the start of Fast Forward.
Okay. So yeah, and I remember his books. They were interesting.
He did they he did not want to follow all the rules, and the Fast Forward books are an example of what happens when you don't do that. Right? There were a lot of great ideas in the Fast Forward books, and I was tangentially a part of that. Fast Forward grew out of a group that I was involved in that did a very short-lived magazine called Shred magazine,
Hmm.
um, and yeah, they uh, they had their own ideas. They're going to prove that it could work, and they proved that the audience gave them pushback. And it don't you can argue long and bitterly about whether or not what the quality might have been, but the fact of the matter was that they didn't do what the audience expected,
Right.
and therefore the audience didn't go with them.
Hmm.
Hello,
And
Linnea. Hello, Surreptitious. Thank you all for joining us. All right, so I think that I think it's interesting that you got in. You made a point of finding the back door
yep.
and getting in that way. Um, what were the first products that published products that you did work on?
The first one was a book of exalted deeds. So
Mm-hmm.
that was a book that we did with Chris Perkins and James Wyatt. Um, and I remember getting to work on some prestige classes on that, and I did some spells. I, I think at that time they were breaking the work up into module units, so they gave me one module unit. Just
Yep.
it's kind of a test drive. Um, and I'd like to think I turned out to be pretty easy to work with, and turned over some interesting materials. So, um, and honestly, I think that out of everything that I've ever worked on, that was probably the highest selling book that I've done ever.
You started off at the top.
Pretty much, pretty much. Um, that led to Forgotten Realms Serpent Kingdoms, where I got two module units.
Right.
Uh, in that one, I think the most interesting thing I got to do in that one was I got to officially define the serpent progenitor race.
Oh,
So I
nice.
gave them the name, so the Saruk. Um, they're pretty powerful, and I also made an attempt to make them playable, but they were immediately playable at epic levels.
Hmm.
I might have been a little overambitious in that goal. I don't I don't think the level adjustment worked out quite the way I intended, and they probably weren't as powerful as they needed to be, honestly, for epic levels. Nevertheless, it still made it. It made it through the development process and into publication that way.
Well, live and learn.
Yeah, yeah. And then after that, there was Forgotten Realms, Mysteries of the Moon Sea. Um, actually, Serpent Kingdoms. That was actually notable for me because that was where I finally got to work with Ed Greenwood,
Hmm.
and actually got to know Ed Greenwood a little bit. Um, I had been a fan of his work on the Forgotten Realms since I was about probably 15 years old. So at that time I was like 30, so already half my life, Ed Greenwood had been like an idol of mine. And here I was able to actually work alongside him on a project, and to me that was just amazing. Um, and now, fast forward some more time, I've actually got Ed Greenwood contributing to something I'm publishing.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Um, I also, like I said, I got to work on Mysteries of the Moon Sea, and then I got to work on D20 Modern Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
Owen and Eric Cagle and Charles Ryan were co-authors on that one. Uh, and it was somewhere in there that it was before I actually got to work on Mysteries of the Moon Sea that I actually left WotC.
Okay, so what? Why? How did that? How and why did that happen?
How and why did that happen? Okay. So I had started in the Star Wars fan club. Like I said, I got moved to customer service. First 2 years Star Wars fan club, then customer service for a couple years. And during that time, I came to realize that WotC is kind of an, I don't want to say it's a hostile place to work, but if you value long-term employment, it's a worrying place to work.
It's a chaotic place to work. I think it's completely fair to say
Worrying
it's
is
a
in,
chaotic place to work.
well, it is chaotic. I mean, customer service honestly was relatively stable compared to a lot of the other areas of the company. But still, I was sitting here being, torn in a couple directions. In one direction, I wanted to be working on product as opposed to answering phones and answering email.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, I was worried about long-term stability because I'm starting a family at this point.
Right.
So when I started, I think that WotC was close to 1,000 employees. Does that sound right?
Yeah, certain could be.
And by the time I was in the customer service department, it was down to about 300. So more than half of the employees have been shown the door, not by choice. You were one of them.
It was an interesting, yeah, interesting time, and the funny thing for me about Wizards is that they've never stopped being that kind of that having that kind of upheaval
Hmm.
regularly.
Yep. So, you know, so on one hand, I'm trying to get into RPG R&D, and they had interviewed me like three different times, three different open positions, and it always kind of seemed like they knew who they wanted before they actually hired them, but they interviewed me anyway, and
Right.
then
Yeah, I
at the
mean,
same.
I tell you, and not you're not wrong about that. You very often, by the time a position is opening, they have a good idea of what they want, but everyone moves up, so it's always going to create openings.
Right.
So you're as much interviewing for the next time you're going to need someone as you are. Now you might come up against someone who's so good you take them now, but
Hmm.
really, more likely you're interviewing for a chance to plug in a layer below what you think you're interviewing for.
Right. Right. So yeah, I kind of felt like there was a long line, and I was I was not near the front of it.
Yeah,
um, which was fine. I was still getting work, and WotC wasn't the only company giving me work at that time. Um, so eventually, living in Western Washington, I was also really getting sick of the traffic and the weather. Wanted to be closer to family, and eventually headed back east. Left the company on my own terms, headed back to Eastern Washington, went back to WSU, finished my degree.
hmm still in English.
Still in English, but I changed the focus from literature to professional writing,
Okay.
aka rhetoric.
Yeah. rhetoric. Rhetoric's one of those terms. My degree is in English and rhetoric also.
Oh
It's
wow,
one of those
we
things
can have
that.
some conversations, huh?
Yeah, but you know what? Every rhetoric's one of those things that each school seems to have a different. Uh, it can be molded to form what the school wants you to focus on.
hmm
So, what was rhetoric for you?
Well, I would say rhetoric was about three different things. One of them was just straight professional writing, like you need to do a project for a company, and I found that incredibly easy.
Yeah.
Um, the other one was like, the what is rhetoric? What's the rhetoric of a chair, right? What's the what do signs and symbols mean, and how does that translate into language? And um, you know, it really gets, I don't know, really gets into some hippy dippy stuff if you follow it down the rabbit hole too
Right.
far. I took a class on the it was a rhetoric class, but it was on the rhetoric and the history of money. So we were like breaking it down. What is money really?
Hmm.
Um, for the whole semester. But the big thing that I studied, what the capstone class was, and what a bunch of the other classes were that were kind of supporting that, were the rhetoric of racism.
Huh.
And so we covered everything from prison writing to, um, oh geez, it's not fresh in my brain at the moment.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So, but you were still doing game writing
hmm
on the side.
Yeah, by that time, WotC had moved on to fourth edition, and I was also not fourth edition compatible.
Hmm.
So I moved on to Pathfinder, and I was doing some work for Paizo at the time. I ended up writing an adventure for them. I did the Grave Knight, which is still around, and they've done quite a bit with that. The Grave Knight being their answer to the Death Knight. Um, so yeah, I mean, I did a lot of work for them. Eventually, uh, I got my degree, and then at that point, it was like, well, now it's time to get a real job, and that real job was 38 Studios, working on a video game, and that
And
was R.A. Salvatore's Kingdoms of Amalur.
right. Yeah. So, I mean, actually, I'm kind of curious. Before we dive over to there, what did you find was some of the differences in writing for Paizo and Pathfinder as opposed to writing for D&D and Wizards?
That's an interesting question. Not a lot, to be honest with you, because Paizo was spun off from the magazine department
Right.
at Wizards, so I feel like they kind of came from the same mindset and they kind of expected the same things. Um, I did get a little bit more of a say on what I got to work on,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it's like the game system was familiar because it was basically third edition. The expectations were the same because you have to write to the same set of design guidelines. Um, so really, it was almost like just switching from one team to another.
Okay. Um, I mean, I've done some work for Paizo over the years, uh, but it's always been very small in scope.
Hmm.
Um, and I know that, and I when they originally formed as, I mean, for those who don't know, Paizo as a company was the periodicals department at Wizards, and when Wizards decided they wanted to get out of making magazines, the people that had been in charge of that, Lisa Stevens and Johnny Wilson, uh, put together this company Paizo and got the license to continue doing Dragon and Dungeon and the other periodicals. So it came out of a lot of Wizards folks, but they also, I know that they pointedly wanted to do some and did do some things pointedly differently, but they were almost all in-house things. So I was just wondering. Your answer is fine. I'm not trying to push back on it,
No, no,
but
feel free to push back.
uh, yeah, I just
I
I've
I
been
don't know
curious as if there
specifically.
was anything you noticed that fell along those lines of, well, Wizards does it this way, and Paizo, they wanted to do it. This was a difference, and it very well might be no, that it was all very subtle.
Well, by the time I was working with Paizo, they'd gone to Pathfinder because they'd lost the
Right.
license to the magazines. I never did get into Dungeon. I tried so many times. That's a nut I never cracked. Um, so by the time they were working on Pathfinder, I mean, there were some fundamental differences in the rules, like CMB as opposed to, I forget the way
Yeah.
that, things like that. But those were rules issues in terms of, um, just the way that they interacted with me as a freelancer. I didn't feel that it was that much
All right.
different than, you know.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, that I asked the question. If your answer is that, I'm like, I believe you.
Mhm. Other people may have had different
Uh,
experiences.
um, and you also started doing some publishing. When did you start doing publishing on your own?
Okay, so publishing on my own didn't start until much later. This wasn't until after I'd worked for 38 Studios, after the studio had gone bust.
Oh, 38. Yeah, I
Um,
keep trying to not talk about that because it's such a
um,
weird thing. And there
I
were
mean,
so many, as you said, Bob Salvatore was involved very deeply. Mary
mhm.
Kirchhoff, the former head of the the book department and the D&D brand team, was involved, and it
She
ended
was way
so,
behind the scenes, but yeah.
yeah. But there were a lot of people who were involved there, and it just ended so badly. And from everything I can see, it was none of them. They were all in management positions, but they weren't the reasons why things ended badly. But they still found out with egg on their face over it for a while to come.
Did the higher ups?
Hmm.
I did.
Yeah.
It didn't affect me negatively, but I was in the narrative department.
Yeah.
Um, I was working alongside Gino Salvatore. Um, Mike Bro was in the narrative department.
Right.
Um, we had a few other people. John Boomershine was the guy that I reported to for most of the time that I was working there, and I feel like I feel like as part of the creative workforce, um, as creative as we came through it pretty well. I don't know about the management and how they did afterward.
I think they. It's just that it. I mean, it ended very badly.
Oh yeah,
Right? A lot of people got
some people went to
screwed over.
jail.
Made. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's somebody on the Rhode Island Economic Development Council who had made this sweetheart deal to Kurt Schilling, to bring 38 Studios, to Rhode Island, to Providence, and I believe they're the one who ended up in jail. They ended up calling that one corruption. Um, but I was, after that, I didn't get immediately picked up by another video game. I wasn't applying for the role playing game industry. So, um, what ended up happening was within about a year of the studio going under, I ended up getting a divorce. And then
Mhm.
I met my current wife there.
Oh.
um, so I stuck around. I was in the Rhode Island area for about
I would say so.
um,
You went out to Rhode Island.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was there. I was over on that side of the country in that area for about a good 8 years, and during that time, there weren't really any video game companies there anymore. There was
Right.
definitely no role playing companies there. So I was welding. I was helping create submarines for the Navy.
Wow.
I did that for 4 years.
How
And I did a little bit of freelancing on the side during that time, but it wasn't creatively, that wasn't a very active time for me.
did you have a welding background, or is that something that you what when the writings dried up, you pursued that?
I had never really considered welding to be a serious option. Um, but in high school, I had taken metal shop all 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can gas weld, I can arc weld, I can wire feed. And when I needed to find a job over there that, they needed welders. They were, electric boats building submarines for the Navy. So I was like, I can do that. And there's still a lot of training involved. What I was able to do was pretty minimal compared to what they needed. So I had to go through, probably a good 2 months worth of training. And then after that, I worked for them for about 4 years.
Hmm. I did not know that. See, I always learn something having these conversations. All right, but the gaming siren called you back.
Oh, absolutely. um, yeah, I mean, basically, what ended up happening was um, things kind of fell apart over there for a couple of reasons. Number one, the apartment we were living in was they jacked the rent like ridiculously, um, and then at the same time they put me on this team where I don't like blaming other people for why I'm not still with the place, but
Right.
this guy was not somebody most people would want to work for. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
And the work itself wasn't particularly pleasant. It was hot. You had to wear your leathers, and sometimes you had to climb into a tank. It's all sealed up. They had to ventilate it, and it was literally 150 degrees to 200 degrees in there. You're sweating buckets. And eventually, I was like, this isn't working for me anymore. They got their production out of me. 4 years is enough. Um, Ended up moving back to Eastern Washington, back to Pullman, which is where I'm at now. And when that happened, that was when I decided it's time to get back into gaming and get serious about it. So for a while, up through COVID, I actually ran a little bit of a company, a painting company, because I also knew how to paint houses. I did that for a while, but then once COVID hit, that I had to run a company in order to do that, and there's just no work to be found. So
Right.
during the COVID lockdown, that's when I said, "All right, enough screwing around. I'm doing this full time, and let the chips fall where they may." And it's been what, 5 years now, and I'm still doing it.
All right. So tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so do you want to hear about the publishing side or do you want to hear about the hustling side?
I will leave it up to you to find the most entertaining thing. Entertain me, Darrin. Entertain me.
Okay. So yeah, I was living over here. I was looking for work, for freelance work. Ended up in a pretty long-term relationship with Legendary Games.
Yeah.
This started out with Jason just kind of out of the blue messaging me right as I was about to move. He's like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing some freelance work?" And I'm like, "Well, um, when I get settled, sure." And then that was one project, which led to another project, which um, I did a lot of work for Legendary Games, and then in addition to that, um, I was also looking for other publishers because Legendary they've got a lot of work they can hand out quite a bit of the time. Every once in a while they're kind of dry, but not very often. Um, but I needed to find other people to work for during those dry times, so I
Hmm.
ended up doing a traveler book for Mongoose. I ended up doing an adventure for not expeditious, Total Party Kill Games. Um, got in really good with Fainting Goat Games. Um, and there were more. I mean, I ended up working with a lot of different companies for um, most of them indie for quite a bit of the time. And it was just like, 1 month to the next, what do I need to pay the bills? How am I going to get that money? Who am
Right.
I going to work for? Where am I going to find the work to cover the bills so I can keep doing this? Um, and then just kind of on a lark, number one, I had written an adventure. I was like, well, I'm going to publish this and just see what happens. And I probably sold all of 2 copies. And then, like I said, it's just kind of on a lark. I said, well, I've got this book full of graph paper that I had when I was in college, and it's full of maps that I made back when I was in college.
Hmm.
So I would just like to preserve these maps digitally so that I don't ever lose them. Right. So I did that. And then I was like, well, I've done this much. Why don't I put them up for sale? Right. And I wasn't expecting anything out of it, but I put them up for sale and they actually sold. And I was only selling them for like $2 a piece, but they're actually selling. I was like, holy crap, I'm getting sales here. I could probably do more ambitious projects than this. Um, so that led to I'm going to take this setting, this space opera setting, adapt it to fifth edition. I had originally published this through David Jarvis's Gunmetal Games back in 2008,
Hmm.
and I ran a Kickstarter. Say we're going to adapt this to fifth edition. Um, so ran the Kickstarter, made like $4,000, which I was reasonably happy with. Um, and then I had somebody, not sure how much detail I should get into on this one. Somebody said they were going to front a whole lot of art for me to make
Okay.
this happen. Um, it took a long time to get 3 pieces out of this person.
Hmm.
And during that time, there were people who were expecting their Kickstarter, and then eventually, I mean, this went on for a while, and I was kind of on him on a fairly regular basis. I was like, "So, how's that coming along? Has the artist turned over anything?" And literally, like one of the guys this guy was contracted with was with oh geez, what's the name of that country that Russia's at war with right now? The
Ukraine.
Ukraine, literally with the Ukraine. So we lost touch with this guy for months. Could not contact him. It was a mess. It was a mess. It went on. Fulfilling that went on a lot longer than I ever intended it to, and eventually 2 things happened. It was going on too long, and this other person said, "I'm not going to be able to fulfill all the pieces we talked about. I'm sorry." And I'm like, "Well, I can either let this kill the project, or I can find another way forward," which at that point led to what has become a long-term partnership with Dean Spencer. I've supported
Okay.
his Patreon for a long time, but he had quite a few pieces that would be pretty perfect for this. So I ended up using those, and I put the thing together, and boom, Reign of Discordia was done. Finally. um, And David Shepard here asks, is that how Darrin Drader Designs started? Yes, it is. It started with maps. um, there had also been a campaign setting that had been kind of backburnering since about 2015. And once I'd fulfilled Reign of Discordia, I said, well, we're going to do this one next. Because I had a lot of material there. I even had some adventures that were already published. Initially, the idea was I'm not going to do the campaign setting. I'm just going to do a bunch of adventures and introduce the campaign setting material through the adventures.
Right.
But what I found was the adventures weren't really selling. And I didn't want to give up on it. So I was like, and the other thing that was happening is that, you know, I did a couple of adventures for it. Rob Manning did a couple of adventures, and over time, I was starting to notice that the core material was starting to drift a little bit. You know, we've got
Right.
one map that shows one thing over here. We've got another map over here where they've got some disagreements. We've got some cities that are close to each other but don't appear on each other's maps, and it's called one thing over here and one thing over there. And I was like, all right, clearly a campaign setting product is necessary, um, just in order to have consistency throughout products. So that's a point where I was talking to um, Fainting Goat Games about doing. We'd already been talking about doing like a few Kickstarters this year, and we said let's do that one first. And so we did. And then once that was done, I got that one fulfilled pretty quickly after the Kickstarter was over. And then I said, okay, now I'm going to start doing monthly support for both settings. And that's what I've been doing ever since. Is 2 products a month, either me writing them or people I'm working with writing them. So I've got Rob Manning, I've got Ed Greenwood, um, I've gotten. I've been talking so much, I'm starting to draw blanks now.
I hear you.
uh, Jeff Thetford has done a product for me.
Right.
Lee Crawl, um, who I believe I gave him his first publishing credits. Um, so anyway, ever since Daring and Dread came out, and the monthly products have been coming out, I've been actually pulling in enough through the drive-through RPG sales to cover my bills every month.
Sweet.
So at this point, I'm not so much a freelancer as I am a publisher.
All right. And this is Triple D.
This is Triple D.
All right. So people want to find that. Where should they go?
They should go to Drive Through RPG and they should look for Darrin Drader Designs.
All
I've got
right.
a publisher page and everything I've got's up there.
And you're coming out with a product or two a month.
I'm shooting for 2 a month. Actually, I have to get 2 a month because I've also got a Patreon going where I promised that. Um, so I have to keep myself honest. I've got to be on the ball.
Right.
If I get behind, I got to get caught up, and that's exactly what happened last month. Um, Due to a convention I went to in July, and then that led to um, getting a little bit of work done after that, and then Dragon Con in August. Um, and Dragon Con killed me because I was meant to do some work while I was there, and I forgot my laptop cord. So it ended up costing me like an entire week. And then I came back from Dragon Con and I got Con Crud, and that knocked me out for
Ugh,
2 more weeks. So I literally almost lost a whole month there.
I hear
Um,
that.
and then I kicked out 4 products in a month to get caught up.
So what? Tell us about some of the products.
All right, so we're doing support for Reign of Discordia and the Daring and Dread campaign setting. The Daring and Dread campaign setting I'll talk about first because I think people are going to be able to relate to it a little bit more. Um, So, um, like I said, initially the idea was just I need to create a book to, decide, make some decisions on what exactly is in this setting. So that's where the initial book came from. Um, and there was a lot of ideas I'd had over the course of about 10 years that made it into the book. Um, and then after that, it was like, what I want this to be, once it gets rolling, is something that has kind of an old school feel, meaning kind of a little bit Tolkien-esque, in terms of the playable species is what we call them now in fifth
Hmm.
edition. Um, More focusing on elves, dwarves, halflings. I decided that I don't necessarily agree with the removal of half elves and half orcs, so I put them back in.
Right.
Um, but like I said, I was really interested in kind of getting back to that Tolkienish feel. Um, so I set it up, in that way, and then I also started working on getting some talent who have worked on the Forgotten Realms, and obviously that includes Ed Greenwood, who surprised the heck out of me when he accepted my offer to actually work on this thing. Um,
Well, Ed, kind of like what you're describing, Ed has always been someone who he wants to work. He wants to work. So, and he loves working with the people that you know that he knows.
mhm. Yeah, I love Ed, and Ed works really fast, and his output is really good. So the first thing I did is I had this city that was part of the setting called the city state of Lustra, which I thought was an interesting concept because it's a metropolis that's run by hedonists, and I thought, knowing what I know about Ed, that would be the perfect place to have him start on this setting.
Oh yeah.
And he did. He did an amazing job, and that ended up being the first support product we did for Daring and Dread. And then when he was done with that, we had a conversation. Hey, what are we going to do next? And I said, well, there's another city, Daelenor. You want to tackle that one? Okay. So he tackled that. That one's been released. Um, we've got, I want to say the big metropolis. How Forgotten Realms has the big metropolis, right?
Right.
Waterdeep.
Waterdeep.
We've got the big metropolis for the setting, which he is currently working on right now, and I don't know if that's going to be our. It's not going to be our next one. Next one's going to be the Seven Kingdoms of the Turon Reach by Rob Manning, and I'm in the middle of editing that right now, trying to get that out before the 31st. So I'm not sure if Ed's up next or if it's going to be the villains of Daring and Dread, or if it's going to be something else. I've got a few different pokers in the fire, so
Right.
it'll kind of depend on who gets their stuff done first. Is probably going to decide what it is.
So, when you say it's Tolkien-esque, uh, I get that. Clearly, you were talking about the um, what was the word that wasn't races that you used?
Species,
Species.
species selection. Yes.
So it's species. So is it is it story wise? Is it narratively Lord of the Rings esque,
Not,
or is it
not so much. I would say that I draw influence from a number of different places. Um, uh, on one hand, it's like my grand vision of this thing is it'll be as big as the Forgotten Realms. We'll have endless support for it, and a ton of lore. But I don't want it to look like the Forgotten Realms. I don't want it to be a Forgotten Realms clone. Um, and I think that I've pretty successfully done something different than the Forgotten Realms. But kind of the background behind this is 100 years ago, the Androsan Empire, which is basically a continent spanning empire, fell apart. And so now it's broken up into a bunch of petty kingdoms. And some of the kingdoms, particularly those that had originally started the empire in the first place, want to recapture the glory. And so you've got like the kingdom of Chironid, um, which has kind of gone to war with a number of its neighbors to try to capture their territory to rebuild the empire. You've got the kingdom of the opulent crown, which is kind of they've got the same goal as Chironid does, except they're trying to do it in a much more friendly way. It's like, oh, we'll go there and we'll help you fight off Chironid, but our ultimate goal is to, kind of the same.
Right.
And then the further you get away from the East Coast, the those particular tensions kind of fall away, and you've got other things. So the initial book, it goes to about halfway out into the continent, and the idea is for there to be a second core book that I'll probably kickstart next year sometime.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be like the Western lands. So we're doing the Eastern lands now. We'll do the Western lands next. And then we've also got the subcontinent of Talosia, which is ruled by dragons. And at some point, that's probably also going to get its own Kickstarter and its own book.
All right. This sounds fantastic. It's a world built for adventuring.
It is absolutely a world built for adventuring. And one of the things I've been doing, I run a streaming game every Thursday. And one of the things I've been doing is running Temple of Elemental Evil in Daring and Dread. And so I'm trying to make it so that it's easy to port those classic adventures into the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough open space for that, and I think it's interesting enough that you can kind of do the module and then kind of break away and get into the things that are going on in the setting, and then get back to the module, and however you want to run it.
All right. So people want to check this out, which sounds like they should. They should. The Darrin Drader, Darrin Drader Design, is that on drive-through is where they should go. All right, look at the time. All right, I'm going to stop here. This is as far as I'm getting on the show today, which is most of the penciling. That buildings are always harder than creatures. But turn that off. We've got our Dragonar Knight. Looks like a tough fight.
Yeah.
And I will, as usual, finish this off. It goes now in the queue for the work in progress shows.
So if you don't mind me, if I can finish a thought real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything is 25% off right now, and there's a reason for it. I just had a very expensive vet bill. Came to about $1,500. My cat, Lando Calrissian, got a urethral blockage and almost died. So I spent the money, or I should say I borrowed the money. Now I've got to pay it back. And so I'm trying to raise money through the...
All right. So this is an especially good time to go to drive-through and check out the DDD stuff, because you've got a sale going on. And it helps a cat.
Yep.
That's internet catnip, as they say. All right, I just want to check up here. David Shepard a while ago asked if your time working on submarines, if you thought of any ways to particularly use them in RPGs as ships or flying ships, or is there some? Did you bring anything from your practical knowledge of welding and such.
So this is gonna be kind of funny, I think, because I haven't actually put anything into a product, but I did run a Star Wars D6 adventure
Right?
shortly after moving back to Eastern Washington here. Um, some old friends of mine got together and we played some Star Wars. And at one point, their goal was to infiltrate a place where they were building TIE fighters and other ships. And I kind of structured the whole thing after my experience at Electric Boat, as far as, the hangars and the security and
Yeah.
all this other stuff. So I would say that's probably the most applicable thing that I've done with that particular experience.
Um, so I I like to wrap the show up, kind of pulling it all together here with the 50 years theme. You came in right about the midpoint in
Hmm.
uh, the industry has changed so much in the last 25 years. The second half, what the industry looks like now is so different from what it looked like for most of the the first two-thirds of it. Right?
Yep.
There is what you did, what I did. The ways of getting in um, are just not there anymore. But whole new venues are open. What what would you say to people that are coming in now and want to make a living of any sort? Either they want to become pros. They want to be the next Darrin Drader. What?
The first thing I tell them is run away very quickly,
This,
run far, run fast, become an accountant.
and it's telling the number of things that you've had in our conversation that were not game related in order
Yep,
to get through this. But let's presume they have their thing that will keep them in house and home. What
yep.
is the path to these days that you see?
Well, there's a few different paths. One would be do a Kickstarter, get a bunch of money, start writing. Hope that you do well. Um, Another path, talk to me. I'll give you work. I will
Yeah.
pay you royalties. I'd love to give you a percent rate, but I'm just not there yet. But I'll pay you royalties. I'll give you 40%. Um, so if you want to get your start, I don't mind a rough turnover and having to do a lot of editing. You know, um, I would say, like I said, I would be an option. Um, get the work in where you can. If you see people who are publishing now, talk to them to see if they need anything. Um, and hopefully they're willing to work with a newbie. um, Once you've done that, maybe go for somebody a little bigger, like Legendary Games. Jason is really good about working with people who are kind of up and coming. Um, there's, I think that's kind of, kind of the way is, do the work and get published where you can, and eventually you get a lot of credits.
Yeah. David says he's digging through the Wizards website archives looking for Spelljanner stuff and came across something you did called the Empire of Gallovinius.
Galvinius, wow, that goes way back. So that high school campaign that I told you about.
Yeah.
It started out a Forgotten Realms campaign. Eventually, it became a Spelljammer campaign, and then Spelljammer campaign became a Galvinius campaign. The reason being that I needed to actually wrap up the campaign at that point. And so I decided that one of the player characters was the long lost emperor of the Empire of Galvinius. So he had to go there and reclaim his throne. And because it was my own world, I decided to write it up. And actually, a tiny portion of it was taken from Wolfgang Bauer. He had an adventure called Rose for Talakara from
Hmm.
a dungeon magazine. And he had about three different city names on his map, and I used those. Um, so anyway, eventually, this map kind of evolved. First, it was hand drawn on about six different pieces of paper. Then I had an artist friend who lived next door to me, and he did his own version. And then eventually, I went in with I want to say it was Photoshop. I actually scanned in the original hand drawn stuff and then photoshopped it and ended up with a map, which is still sitting over in my pile of stuff over there, which is quite large. Um, but I released that, and I want to say it's about a 40-page PDF to go
Yeah.
with it. Uh, but that was the first setting I ever made. Um, I don't know that I necessarily recommend it, but it is what it is. And if you're looking at Daring and Dread, and you're looking at that, you might notice there's some overlap between the characters Whisperfoot and Thor, and the characters Whisperfoot and Wrathorn, who appear in Daring and Dread. I decided Thor was a little too much on the nose,
Yeah.
so it became Wrathorn.
All right.
But I decided they were worth keeping around, so I moved them to the Daring and Dread campaign setting.
All right. So good sleuthing, David Shepard.
Yes,
You
yes.
sniffed it out. All right, Darrin, thank you very much for an hour and a half. Just flies by. Thank you very much for this. Hopefully, we'll get you back on to chat some more. In the meanwhile, I'm going to make sure I get a link in the show notes, but people can just go to drive through and look up the Darrin Drader design, and you've got that 25% was 25% off sale going on right now.
25% off everything. Every little bit counts. I owe a lot of money on this cat.
Help the kitty. Help the
Help
kitty.
kitty.
And get some awesome game product in the meanwhile. All right, if you hang on, I'm just going to do an outro, and then you and I can say ciao. But thank you very much for showing up.
Thanks for having me.
All right, there we go. That was my conversation with Darrin Drader from Darrin Drader Design, among many other things. Please go to drivethrough.com and check out Darrin Drader Design. They've got that 25% sale going on right now. It helps to pay for the medical treatment that his cat needed, and that's a terrific reason to do it. Also, it sounded really awesome. I tell you, as I said at the beginning, Darrin and I have never really worked together on anything. I've always been really impressed by the stuff he does, and looking over it, getting ready for this, I found myself wishing I had more time to just kind of to dive deep into the products that he has up there. Go have a look. I'm sure you're going to find lots of things you like. In the meanwhile, I will be back tomorrow for another episode of Random Encounters, the improv cartooning show I do on the Thursday nights. I'll be back next week for more 50 Years in the Dungeon. I'm not sure whether it's going to be a new interview or a work in progress show. But if you want to know ahead of time, you want to see stuff as quickly as possible, then you should sign up for our free newsletter, 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com. You'll get to see the finished art as soon as possible. In fact, I will be posting the sketch version of what I've got done there, so you'll be able to see that and download it for whatever purposes you might want. Don't do anything nefarious. But yes, you get all the inside info and first shot at everything. If you like what I'm doing and you want to be a deeper part of that, you may want to join my Patreon, patreon.com/Stannex, STANNEX. And all sorts of fun things you get out of that. There's a free version of that too. Of course, Patreon is built more for the money grubbing angle. As Darrin said, we gotta keep the roof over our heads. It's getting harder and harder. So I'd really appreciate it if you went over there and had a look at my Patreon. That's it. I got nothing else. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, everyone who was in the chat. I'm not even going to try and remember everyone's names because I will forget people and that'll make me look bad. So I'll just say no one and say thank you to you all. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, take care, everyone. Bye.